Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast. This is the 2020 Servant Leader Series. And today we're joined by a guest who has spoken live in front of more than 1 million people, more than 2,500 events. He is a father with 2 kids. He's been married more than 24 years. He's got 14 books to his name and is part of the Jack Canfield coaching team. Help me welcome Scott Schilling. Thank you for being here, Scott. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, I love it. So I hear you just got back from Kenya.
Well, our team got back from Kenya.
Okay.
And some really exciting developments.
Now, you've also just finished a book, or you're just wrapping one up. Is that right?
It's about to release this week.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about the book and what your objective, what your priorities are with this book.
Well, the book is really my life work. It's called That Sucks, What Now? Real world solutions to getting through what you're going through. Okay. See, I look at the That Sucks, What Now is actually a positive statement. A friend of mine said, I didn't realize you've been through all these different things in your career and in your life. And he said, what did you say to yourself afterwards? I went, that sucks, what now? In other words, that sucks. I would prefer it didn't happen this way. And the what now is no time for a pity party. Let's get to work. Let's fix it, change it, do whatever you have to do. And that's why it's the real world solutions of getting through what you're going through, because we're all going through it. The question is whether you admit it or not.
Yes, yeah. Well, and some people really hold that philosophy of fake it till you make it. And the challenge with fake it till you make it, in my opinion, is eventually you begin to believe the lie yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm actually a faith it till you make it guy. And so it's one thing that I've never done. I mean, or never proposed to other people to do, because if you're faking it, you're not making it. You're not on the right track. And if you take that ideology, I think you're really missing something, especially from a leadership role. If you were encouraging somebody to fake it, really, is that what you really want to purport? I don't think so.
Now, I do have a great appreciation for developing the story as it's happening, or even developing the story in advance, because I know the power of our imagination. Mm-hmm. Jack Canfield talks about the idea of predicting or planning out. In fact, it was his book, Success Principles, where I read about the 5-year party. Mm-hmm. And that completely changed the way I look at life, the understanding of the reticular activating system and our ability to create an image that isn't yet. I believe that's the definition of faith, right? Mm-hmm. The substance of things hoped for, but not yet seen. I mean, it's not quite here yet, but we have a pretty good idea that it's coming.
Exactly.
We can't necessarily predict those things, can we?
Well, that's where the Come As You'll Be party was really designed to. Where will you be 5 years from now? And when you start to vision those things and you start to see it, fear and faith share the same definition. Confidence in the unseen, assurance of the unknown. If you believe in the negative, it's called fear. If you believe in the positive, it's called faith. So the fact is, nobody would be in business without faith, because there's no assurance. Right? There's no assurance that anybody will ever come to your location. There's no assurance that anybody will ever book you, right? So when we can vision, God's given us a tremendous imagination, the ability to dream the dreams of our heart. And He never puts anything on our heart that He hasn't equipped us or will equip us to be able to achieve. So that's where that visioning comes in, I think, in my world. Jack and I have a lot of conversations about that over time,
So when you talk about the things that you've been through and how life sucks, now what? I think that's a philosophy you share with Jack Canfield. I think the way
he actually wrote the foreword.
Some will, some won't, so what? Move on.
Yeah, some will, some won't, so what? Someone's waiting next. The reality is stuff is going to happen to us in life. And that's really the kind of the crux of the book, is the understanding that good, bad, ugly, it's just called life. Right. Stuff happens, right? In fact, that's the first 2 words of the book. Actually, it's S with a bunch of asterisks, happen. But it actually is stuff happens. Stuff happens to each and every one of us. It's not about the stuff. It's how we respond to the stuff and how we take that and then use it, throughout our later life. I had interesting conversation on the airplane the other day. Somebody said, I'm tired of failing all the time. And I said, well, have you quit? And they said, well, no. I said, well, then you haven't failed. And they said, what do you mean? I said, my definition of failure only includes the word quit. If there is no combination of quit, there is no failure. It's simply a learning event.
I can appreciate that.
We have the choice to reframe it.
In John Maxwell's book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You'll Learn, he kind of approaches that same philosophy that, until you've given up, until you've walked away from the project altogether, it's not over yet.
Right.
You can come back to it. Now, before we started recording, one of the comments that you made was the things that I've been through have really given me the strength to be through those things again. Whether it's a financial collapse or it's a health scare or whatever it is, the fact that I've been knocked down and I got up gave me more power to get up next time. Tell me a little bit more about some of the things that you've struggled with that people would look at and go, okay, I never knew that about you, and that gives me more understanding of my own ability.
Well, I lived through a near-death experience and actually had a full-blown cerebellar stroke. And if you understand the cerebellum, it's responsible for speech, memory, fine motor skill, walking, talking, vertigo. By the grace of God, I walk away with nothing. Now, what's interesting is, as I had my stroke, they took me to the emergency room, and they released me 5 hours later with a major migraine.
Wow.
I went on set the next day, shot 3 infomercial sets, 53 minutes, 18 minutes, 14 minutes. Then they asked me to go get an MRI. Then the first words were, get your butt to the hospital, check into ICU, you've had a stroke.
Wow.
Then I spent 6 days in intensive care, and I'm going to suggest they weren't trying to keep me alive. They were trying to understand why I was alive. And the reality of all that experience, at one point, it was kind of funny because I got a little frustrated with the team, and I said, I got it all figured out. And they said, okay, what is it? I said, well, it's obvious. It's God's grace, mercy, and favor on my life. And they said, well, that's as good an answer as we got. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm an overachiever. I always have been. I lived, And so it was, it's one of those things that I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. Trust me. And especially the angiogram and going up into your brain and the things they do. But it taught me that, I was saved. I was saved to come back. My job wasn't done here. I needed to get this book out. I needed to help people understand that whatever you've been through, and I know you've been through a lot, because I've been through a lot, but there's more. And the lot that you've been through simply gets you ready for the more that's yet to happen.
We don't have a problem with that when we think about the first chair violinist in the orchestra, or we think about the starting quarterback or the starting offensive lineman or somebody playing at Wimbledon. We don't have any issue with thinking that they're going to have to put in some serious hours. They're going to have to do a whole lot more work on the court or on the field or in the gym or on the concert chair. We have no issue with realizing that the elites of life have to work harder. They have to put in more. But when we look at the exercises of life, the relationship troubles, the financial troubles, the barriers to success or the lack of success, or that, I heard a guy talk about it, he called it the near success syndrome, where you just feel like you're reaching and you're grabbing, but it's like plowing snow in the middle of a blizzard. Every time you throw a shovel, there's another one there. And that constant struggle and challenge for many people is a reason to quit. So what gave you the ability to look at, or the desire, the tenacity to look at the challenges and go, bring it on. Just keep coming.
Well, think about it, Loren. We both have the opportunity to speak and be around some great speakers and some different people. And we get to be around some people, how do I say this nicely, that are great people, but probably not such great orators.
Right.
And you sit there and you go, wait a second, but I've been granted these gifts and talents, and if they can do it, why can't I do it? Well, the answer is I can do it. So if I can do it, I want to do it, right? And as educators, we can teach anybody almost anything. but we can't teach them want to. You gotta
have a passion.
want to.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know that it's passion, actually, at first. I think it's just a desire to be the best that you can be at whatever it is. I was a 5-sport athlete growing up. I don't know that I was great at any of them, but I was pretty good at all of them. And I was good enough to play Big Ten football. So, I had the opportunity to be coached by the best of the best and to be around achievers my entire career. And if what you tend to find out, now, again, we were talking before we went on, I shared the stage with Colin Powell and Mary Buffett and presidents, and you know what you find out back in the green room? They're people. They're just like you and me. They simply had a desire to learn more, do more, be more, share more, right? They had that inspiration, that enthusiasm to get out and serve the greater good. And when you have that desire to serve the greater good, it kind of keeps you going to want to do more.
Well, and I think when you take the focus off yourself and ask yourself, what can I do for other people?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that seems to be the click, the switch, if you will. A lot of people who are ego-driven, whether they're megalomaniacs or just downright selfish, a lot of them feel like my success, I have to, again, fake it till I make it. I have to tout it. I have to claim it, even if nobody else can see it. I've got to tell them how successful I am. I have to tell them how awesome I am. I have to tell them how wonderful I am. And the reality is, inside, they're a little kitten in the corner screaming with both claws out, with all that they have, just to convince themselves.
And that's actually one of the ways that, quite frankly, I get to know a lot of the big name people, is because the big name people are some of those people, right? They have the same hurts, the same things. I've shared conversations that I won't reveal with some amazing people, but because I gave them a safe space to have those conversations, they've revealed I might not be as tough as I always portray,
right,
or I might not be as ... right? And here's the reality. We're all that way. We all have our stuff. We all have our issues. We all have our little nicks that we take here and there. And again, just before we went on, you hear all the time that if somebody was once rich, claims bankruptcy, loses everything, because they knew how to get rich, they'll know how to get rich again.
Right.
And you hear that fairly consistently in the financial realm, but the reality is it's across all areas of life. If you've been hurt, physically, and have come back from it, you know how to come back from it again.
Right.
Or whatever the cases might be, right? And so that's really, the new book is really across all areas of life to say, we've all taken shots across the bow. We've all been hurt more than we choose to admit publicly. My daughter, I love my daughter dearly, 31 years old, she goes, Daddy, you never have a bad day. I said, are you kidding? I have plenty
of where you got it.
I have plenty of bad days. You're just not going to see it publicly. What's the advantage of showing your bad day all the time? I mean, that just makes no sense to me. Now, in the book, I share things that I've never shared with anybody before. And so it's, it actually caused me, one of the editors said, man, this is really, as we're working on it,
kind of depressing.
This is really awesome. Has Peggy read the book? My wife. I go, no. I said, I probably should have done that. Yeah. And so then she started reading it, and she goes, how do I not know these things? We've been married 24 years. And I said, well, they're just not the things that you talk about, right? They're not terrible. I mean, obviously I'm talking about them. I talk about them now in the book. But it wasn't a purposeful desire not to share. It was a purposeful desire not to focus
right
on what might have not gone well. Is that
I
there's the,
think it's
the
it's a law of-
differentiation?
yeah, it's a huge differentiation. I mean, one of the teachings that I follow talks about how when you look at the problem here, you may see the minutia of the problem, but you lose sight of everything beyond it because you're so focused on the problem. The law of quantum physics says you actually get more of
Right.
what you're focused on. So whether that's a negative thought or it's the problem in front of your face or it's staring at the oncoming headlights. When we teach our kids to drive, we tell them don't look at the oncoming headlights. You will steer into them. That's not because you're an idiot. It's not because you're incompetent as a driver. It's because it's the natural thing to progress toward whatever you're focused on, whatever you're looking at. That's where you're going.
That's the reticular activating system, right? Passing Texas Motor Speedway on the way out here, right? What do they teach drivers? If there's a wreck, don't focus on the wall, don't focus on the wreck, focus on the hole.
Yeah.
Focus
Look
on
for the path through.
the path between the cars.
Right.
Because what you focus on, your body will automatically take you to. And so it's true in business, it's true in life, it's true in driving, it's true in all of that. And so I choose not to focus. And it's really interesting, in some of the early stages with this book, one of my friends said, "God, you're really emotional right now." Well, I had just finished kind of an editing session.
Right.
And I had just relived a couple things, and I go, gosh, this is why I don't focus on this stuff. I mean, I'm as human as anybody else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you focus on the sky falling, Chicken Little, the sky will fall,
Yeah.
Well,
And I find in relationships especially, if you're focused on what could go wrong, what you have done wrong, what you feel guilty for, what you're blaming everybody else for, all the blame and the shame and the guilt begins to not only eat at you on the inside, you lose the energy that you would have had, you lose the passion for your mate that you would have had, but in addition to that, you begin to project that onto them. And so everything you thought could go wrong, you're now setting it up to cause it to go wrong. And if you think fake it until you make it works, negative thinking until you make it will actually be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
On that, like you said, the faith side or the fear side, you're going to go one way or the other.
Well, it's funny. I mentioned that I had played football in the Big Ten. I was a kicker and punter. But I read the book Psycho-Cybernetics, Malcolm Gladwell, in 1976.
Wow.
Boy, that's a long time ago. Anyway, but here's the difference. Kicking. Do you focus to make the kick, or do you focus to not miss the kick?
Right.
Totally different. Right. And Psycho-Cybernetics, way back when, was really about focusing on what you want, right? And we live in this society for whatever reason. As an example, and this is something Jack and I have talked about a long time, a war on drugs. If you focus on war, you'll have war. How about peace without drugs, right? I mean, we really want to, let's focus on the things we want, not on the things we don't want.
Sometimes that seems like a battle of nomenclature.
It seems like it is, but it actually isn't. That's you study the brain enough. I study the brain enough. We know that the subconscious can't hold the negative.
Right.
Right? So you can't run a double negative to get the positive. You can say it, but the brain won't hear it that way. And the brain, the subliminal is whatever you do, don't eat potato chips.
Right.
You're probably going to go get potato chips.
And now you're craving them.
Because your brain heard eat potato chips. It didn't hear the don't.
Just
Right.
like you tell your kids don't spill the water, and then you see a trail all the way through the house. You're like, didn't I tell you not to do that? Well, you did, but it was irrelevant. So
Versus be careful as you carry the water.
correct.
Would have been a totally different outcome, more than likely.
So tell me a little bit about, and I want to kind of overlay this Servant Leader series is really in conjunction with some new projects that I'm working on. And part of what I've experienced over the last 20, 25 years of studying leadership, that's when I started studying John Maxwell. I've seen that there are 5 spokes, and this is my own categorization. I don't know who else agrees with it. Frankly, I don't care.
I liked them when you sent them
But
to me.
I think they're pretty solid. They've been
think so,
25
too.
years of experience and a lot of research and reading. But I think those 5 spokes are the authority, the respect, the influence, the impact, and then the story or the transformation that happens as a result of those. Now, story goes back to what you're talking about in your book, Life Sucks, or That Sucks, Now What? Really is asking, how do you reframe the train wreck you just went through? What I also find, though, is that in the same way that you might start with a wheel, at the spindle, there's a certain diameter, if you will, of each of those things, the influence, the impact, the authority. But at the same time, the further those grow, it's not just the expansion of the circumference, it's the space of the area in each of those as well. And so I want to ask, from an authority standpoint, when you talk about your book, what is the authority that you carry into this book? Is the platform speaking, the 14 books that you've written, the millions of people that you've spoken to, the participation with Jack Canfield, is that the authority that you have to write this book?
Well, I've lived every one of the events I've talked about. I'm the authority in my own dang life.
Okay.
I lived through a cerebellar stroke. 30 days after my stroke, I was on stage, and I was teaching business acumen. And I said, as an entrepreneur, sometimes it gets tough. I mean, 30 days ago, I had a full-blown cerebellar stroke. Sometimes you just got to fight through. And then I went on and kept on teaching the business side, right? Afterwards, somebody came up and said, are you saying 30 days ago you had a full-blown cerebellar stroke? I said, yeah. People don't come out like you. Well, if you say so, this is the only experience I've lived. Why do you say that? I work for the American Heart and Stroke Association. I said, good, use me. We can't pay you. I said, I never asked to be paid. If my story is so unique, let's use it to do good for others. What gives me the authority? I have lived everything in this book. This isn't a book about theory. This is, I had this financial faux pas. I had this parenting faux pas. I had a starter marriage. I had a marriage faux pas.
Starter marriage, I like that.
I had...
I think people are going to be using that when I had a starter marriage.
That's right.
It's like your starter home or your starter car.
I never felt so small in my life when Cynthia Kersey made an impassioned plea to support Habitat for Humanity. The friend on this side said, I'm writing a $50,000 check. The friend on this side said, I'm writing a $5,000 check. They both looked at me and said, what are you going to do? I said, I can't. What do you mean you can't? I can't write a check. I'm not liquid. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to do something. Well, out of lack, I wrote my first book, Talking with Giants, which has 21 charities tied to it. And since 2007, the proceeds from that book have gone to support Cynthia's cause and 20 other causes. So out of lack came my first book.
So there's a little motivation in that.
Well, I never felt so small in my life. So how many times have those who are watching this or listening to this, has somebody just kind of popped you in the forehead or hit you in the gut, and you just kind of went, oh, I feel terrible. It's not the I feel terrible that counts. It's the what now?
Right.
That sucks. What now? And there's a difference between now what, which is questioning, and a what now, which is commanding. That's why it's that sucks. What now is, what am I going to do about it? Well, in that instance, I created my first book, which then extended my relationship with Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen and Cynthia Kersey and Harv Eker and the CEO of Kimberly-Clark and ... So it's not that. So again, from the authority to circle back, sorry, I just get excited about this because I think what you're doing is great. I really do. And I think what gives us the authority, as we become more mature, that's code word for older.
Yes.
Right. As we become more mature, just by the fact if we've paid attention at all while we're on the planet, we gain authority. Now, here's what, if we would really pay attention and understand that as boomers, or I'm a boomer, that if I teamed with a millennial, we both have a similar desire to gain significance in the world today. Me, because I've had my butt kicked. Them, because they just don't want to get their butt kicked. They just
Right.
want to contribute. Well, if we would take boomers and match them with millennials, we take the wisdom from the butt kickings with the heart and the desire to gain the significance. Do you understand what we could do in this world?
Absolutely.
That's what I propose in the book, actually.
Well, and that's one of the things when I talk about authority, I understand that authority is A, it's a two-way street, and B, it's a pass-through.
Yeah.
And so the more authority you try to possess on your own, the more you become a tyrant. The more authority you gain through knowledge, through relationships, through surrender, through submission, the more authority you pass on to those who are coming behind you going, I just can't do this on my own. You're right, you can't, but let me give you a little bit of something that'll help you. Let me mentor you. Let me walk you through this
Right.
process. And so authority in that way becomes not only a two-way street, but a pass-through. Or as John Maxwell says, with leadership, you have to learn to be a river and not a reservoir. Don't catch everything and hold it on your own, but figure out how to open your capacity to receive and open your capacity to give. So
Well,
that
a
fits right in with what you're talking
A source never knows where the river ends up,
about. Right.
right?
Never ask the question. It never asked the question. There's never a waterfall that went, ocean, lake, bathtub, who knows?
Whatever, wherever it ends up. I like that.
So let's talk a little bit about the respect aspect of it, because you've talked about Colin Powell and guys like Ollie North and Troy Aikman. I know these are people who've been a part of that large platform team that you were with for a while. A lot of those guys have the respect of being a well-known celebrity, if you will, and it's their celebrity status, their accomplishments in another field that cause people to go, oh, that's a well-respected name. But then we also know there are Harvey Weinsteins and Matt Lauers who have, quote unquote, the well-respected name, the celebrity, the big paycheck, all of the recognition in the world, and yet behind the scenes, the person is not somebody you want to spend a whole lot of time with.
Well, there's a lot of that, unfortunately, in our industry. There's a lot of the fake it till you make it guys from stage and things like that. We can't let that, the one reputation, the one credentials, the one person that you can take care of is you, is me.
Right.
Right? And so I want to do everything I can to leave people better off for the interaction, period. My pre-event prayer is, Lord, allow the words that I share here today to positively impact 100% of the lives in this audience, one way, shape, or form. Only you know who you sent here to hear this message. Allow me to do the best I can to deliver that message, be a vehicle and of service to you. All I can ever have is high intention, low attachment. High intention of imparting something great for each and every one, and a low attachment is as to what that nugget is for them or for me, quite frankly.
And what the outcome might be.
And what the outcome might be.
Right.
So it's an intention of doing that. And over time, that recognition, that respect, all that's developed over time. Right? And it's especially, let's just say you have some authority and you have some power. Well, there is a thing called misuse of power.
Yes.
Right? It's a couple of the names you mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? And so the point is, how do you use that power? Do you use that power to be a nicer, gentler, kinder person that invests back into other people? Or do you use that power to take advantage of other people? Both are choices.
Right.
Both are choices. And we've been given choice.
So where does respect fall in that?
Well, I think respect is, my platform is really, and the new book is really about restoring respect, honor, and dignity in the world. I think what's so fascinating to me, and especially this book is so top of mind with me now, that just smiling at people and honoring them and showing them respect, allowing them to get out of this aisle on the plane this morning ahead of me.
Right.
It's not a big thing. What's it going to change my life? 30 seconds? But when you do that, it's like, oh, why thank you. Because I honored them. I respected them. I allowed their dignity to show, right? And that's really, if if there's anything that we can accomplish through the book, is if we can create more respect, honor, and dignity on the planet, just think how much nicer it would be. I mean, you wouldn't have, like, there was a FedEx truck on the drive out here. I know this sounds weird, but these are the things I think of right now. FedEx truck signaling. I could have blown past him. He's 53 feet long plus a cab. You know, I just slowed down a little bit and let him come over. What's the difference? You know, honor, make his life easier. I mean, he's out there. Do you understand what stress he might be under if he's new at that?
Right.
You know?
Well, and I think the idea of just being aware of other people.
Yeah.
I mean, many people, and I think the podcast 2 days ago was about myopic leadership. And it's that inability to see the big picture and yet still focus on what's right in front of you. I mean, we need to, as you said earlier, be present in the moment that we're living in, but that doesn't mean so present that we completely lose sight of other human beings around us and what their needs might be. And, you know, we hear it all the time. You don't know what kind of day they've had. You don't know what kind of, that sucks, they've been through this week, this month, this year, this decade. You know, I saw a meme on Facebook. I'm really big at paying attention to what the social media conversations look like. Uh-huh. And it was a meme of a lady standing in a subway. She's probably in her late 70s or 80s, kind of hunched over, holding onto the standing rail. And there were 4 millennials sitting there with their earbuds in, all staring at their phone. Any one of them could have given up their seat, but they wouldn't. And my first thought was, if I were on that train, I would probably have a new set of headphones because I would have snatched them out of somebody's head at this point. Give me those. Get up and let her sit down. You know, but that's the father in me, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have tolerated that from my boys for 2 seconds. But the idea that we've created a generation, and it's probably true of every generation in the past, where the mind is so engrossed in only what's right in front of me and only what matters to me, that we're oblivious to the needs, the concerns, the compassion of others. I think that respect, very much like authority, a lot of people want to demand it. They want to command it. They want to come in and tell you this is how it's going to be. You're going to listen to me. I've got the position. I've got the rank. I've got the title. You need to do this. I'm a celebrity. Don't you know who I am? Kind of comments. And yet I feel like both authority and respect are two-way streets, and they're earned in order to grow them. But the only way to earn them is to give them away.
Totally agree. That's what I was thinking as you were talking. It's really about, in order to get respect, you first have to give respect. Yeah. You know, what was interesting on the plane this morning is a very diverse nationalities.
Right.
And so I actually saw people from the window trying to get out, and there was a certain person on the aisle that wouldn't stand up and get out of the way to allow him out. He just kind of like shrunk down a little bit and wouldn't move. And I went, well, that's kind of mean at first, you know, and then I went, that's their culture.
Right.
It was just, again, not being judgmental, being
just
observant.
Right.
Right. And so that's why I really applaud you for what you're doing with this, because I agree with the 5 spokes, and I agree with what you're saying, that if we can increase respect, which means we have to take the first action by definition.
Right.
If in order to get respect, we have to give respect, we're in control. That's our choice.
Right.
It's our choice to respect people. Okay, point of demarcation. We're in a whole new decade. Great time to start respecting each other.
So influence. Obviously, speaking to 1 million people, 2,500 live events, the people that you've coached, the people you've spoken for, the books that you've written, influence obviously is something of high priority to you. So how do you gain influence? How do you build influence?
Well, I think you gain influence by earning respect, by being truthful, by being integrous, by doing things the right way. You know, there are people. One of the proudest. I was just having this conversation last week. One of the proudest things, and I presented a lot of products from stage. I've done 8 infomercials. I've been very blessed to do a variety of different things. But the one thing that I'm most proud of if I've presented a product for somebody's consumption, for them to buy from stage, is they stay sold. In other words, people don't buy it
And have
unless...
buyer's remorse.
Correct.
Okay.
Because I don't sell it if it's not supposed to be sold. I'm within 0.3% over 1,000 events. I'm within 0.3% of what was sold versus what stayed sold.
Wow.
That's a crazy number.
That is a crazy number. That's not even in a margin of error.
Exactly. And that's what I'm proudest of. Because, and then people sit there and say, well, I can close so much more business. Well, what stays sold?
Right.
Well, 35% of that. Well, that means you lost 65% of that.
So 65% of the people had buyer's remorse, felt like their arm was twisted, felt like they'd been had, felt like they were oversold something that they didn't necessarily need. They bought in the moment emotionally without any logical conclusion behind it. And sadly, in our industry, that is a common thing. In fact, there are people who teach others to manipulate through stories how to do that.
And so how does that tie to influence? Because what you're getting is integrous, right? It's in integrity. I'm not going to say to you, you need this if you don't need this, because I'll benefit if you get it, but that's not the way it works. This comes back from the Ziegler Foundation.
Right.
When I read "See You" at the top when I was 17 years old, just a few years ago, right? That said,
last week, wasn't it?
That's right. You can have everything in life you want when you help enough other people get what they want. At 17, that hit my heart. And I had the honor to tell Zig that many times. I said, you set my path in my life with that one quote alone.
Wow.
Because it became the positioning, right?
The driving motivator, right?
I can have everything. Okay, well, that's cool. I like that. When I help you and everybody else get what you want. Wow, that was just a positioning that was set out right from the beginning in my career, and actually before my career. And it's amazing what a difference that has made. And so again, when you talk about influence, now people know that's what they'll get from me, right? Over the years, that becomes the answer.
Well, and I think that ties into, in my opinion, the next spoke in the wheel, and that is impact. See, a lot of people have, especially today, we have a coined phrase, influencers. And by influencer, they mean I've got X millions of followers, or, my Instagram account looks like this. I just met with a girl yesterday who, she said she's just crossed the 11,000 mark, but she's generating anywhere from $500 to $2,000 per Instagram post based on the volume of people that she, quote unquote, influences. And I thought, that's a pretty arbitrary number of influence, because you're not necessarily measuring the ROI. You're not necessarily measuring the sell-through or the return ratio. You're just looking at sheer volume of numbers, which in my opinion is a fool's game, and that eventually will pan itself out. But the label influencer is a label that a lot of people carry today, and they hold it in high esteem. They feel like, man, this is all I need to know is that I am an influencer and it looks like this. And I think, well, that's great, but the next level really is impact. And so when you think about, can you close the deal? Well, yeah, that's awesome. You can close, 10 out of 10. But if 6 out of 10 return the product, if 6 out of 10 didn't follow the instructions you had, I met with a guy and his son this last weekend. We ended up spending close to 4 hours together. And at one point, I kind of explained to the young man what I do and how I make my living. And he said, well, what do you charge for that? And I told him, and he's like, well, we can't afford to pay that. I said, I understand that. He said, so how much is our bill going to be for today? I said, there's no bill for today. He said, how does that work? I said, well, number one, I'm my own boss, so the only person I answer to is my wife. And
Exactly.
When I explain the story, she'll get it. But here's the reality. And I turned back to his dad and I said, 6 months ago when you and I met, your relationship with your son was on the rocks. You were afraid it was going to be over. And he said, yeah, he wouldn't listen to me, wouldn't return my phone calls, wouldn't show up, was completely ignoring our visitation weekends. I mean, I figured I was afraid it was done. I said, and I gave you 3 words to live by. Do you remember what those 3 words were? A little tear in the corner of his eye, he said, be the lighthouse. And I said, and what does that mean? He said, that my job was to stand my ground, not pursue, and let him be himself. And so I turned to his son and I said, have you seen him do that? He said, yeah, I had no idea why he was doing that.
That's
and
cool.
I said, so my job is to influence him to make a change in the way that he parents. And the fact that you're here today says he's actually taken the advice that I've given him.
That's awesome.
And that's worth any paycheck he could write to me. Because there are a number of people, regardless of the size of the check that they write for coaching, that ultimately don't take any of the advice.
Yeah.
Well, that's like putting ice in a cup of hot water. Yes, there's going to be some influence, but it's not going to be a long-term impact. Holding the ice over the cup, no influence, no impact. Putting the ice in the cup, influence, short-term impact. You put enough ice in there, it changes the climate, it changes the culture. And so what you're talking about with that sell-through and that integrous process to say, I'm not going to give you what's not going to work for you. I don't want you to have this. And, you know, some people, again, they play that game even, the scarcity. Well, there's only so many people that can have it, and this may not be right for you. And there's a lot of manipulation in that process. But the reality is, if I truly believe that what I have to offer is going to impact your life, it's going to change your life, it's going to transform you, then I want you to have it. I'm going to make the fastest way possible for you to get your hands on it, whatever the cost of that is, to make that happen. So it sounds like that's what you're talking about. Let's talk for a moment about impact, about the intent that you intend with your book. What kind of impact do you intend to have with that?
So let me tell you one of the stories that's in the book. It was from one of my coaching sessions. So I had a wonderful client. She's absolutely amazing. Had a fabulous book come out. And as the book was coming out, she had asked for an endorsement from a very well-known person. And she said, I really want to talk to you about this. And I said, okay, what's going on? And I reached out to this person and they said, go ahead and write the endorsement. I'll read it. If I like it, I'll sign off on it. And you can use it. And I said, okay. And she said, well, I think I'll sell a whole lot of books if I get that. So I'm thinking of doing that. I said, oh, so you're after fame? And she goes, what do you mean I'm after fame? I said, well, you want to sell more books. You want to become famous. And she goes, no, I want to get this message out. I said, oh, so you're after impact. And she said, wait a second, what are you talking about? I said, you don't feel that this is in integrity to do this, and yet you want to sell more books because you want to use this name, but it doesn't feel right to you. Don't you think you have your answer? And she goes, well, I think so. I said, are you out after fame or are you out after impact? She goes, I'm after impact. I said, great. So you have no problem selling one book. And she said, well, that would be terrible. Oh my God, wait. I wasn't done. You have no problem selling one book to the woman that becomes the next Mother Teresa. She goes, that'd be awesome. That'd be impact. I said, exactly. I said, okay, let's take this out of, did Mother Teresa go after fame or go after impact? She went after impact. She was at the street level every day. She was working. And what happened because of the impact she caused? She became famous.
Right.
If you go after fame, fame is fleeting. I didn't make that up. That's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
If you go after impact and make enough impact, you may or may not become famous. So literally, that's one of the stories. That story is in the book, and it's because I want impact. My life, what's important to me is impact. I've done 2,500 events. I've spoken to over 1 million people live in arenas. I've done all this different stuff. Nobody knows my name, relatively.
Right.
Why? Because it's never been about me.
Right.
It's been about the material. It's been about the work. It's been about the good. Now, people know who I am and stuff like that, but I'm not a name, right? And I'm okay with that. Now, this new book, this is a little different because this is kind of the culmination of all that. And it's really funny because everybody's like, you got to get your name out there. You got to be doing the podcast. You got to be doing the TV shows. You got to be, okay. But it's not because that's what I want. I mean, it's not because I want my name out there. What I want is the material from the book to touch lives in a positive way. My morning declaration is to positively impact about 1 billion lives on the planet. And I was doing a radio show not long ago, and the host said, well, that's kind of crazy. And I said, why? Zuckerberg hits 500 million a day. So you're saying he's better than I am? And I said, and he goes, well, now you're getting flip about it. I said, no, that's only 1 out of 7. That's not that big a deal. He said, see, you are getting flipped about. I said, no, I'm not. I said, what if that's my desire, my intention, and I hit 100 million? Or what if I'm no good at it and I hit 10 million? Or what if I'm really bad at it and I've already hit my million?
And I'm done.
And I'm done. Would that be okay? And he goes, you're serious about this? I said, well, why wouldn't I be? With today's communication, with podcasts, with TV, with the media outlets, I just filmed something around the book in Phoenix 3 weeks ago. 28 networks, potential of 90 million homes in 196 countries.
Wow.
Now, do I think I'm going to hit all those? No clue. But if it's the one person that can then go back into that stream and get all those people, that's fine. So impact is really that, for me, it's an internal desire to serve everybody at the highest level. My life purpose statement is to inspire and empower others to serve humanity through living their life's purpose in spirit, love, and joy. So right now, I'm on purpose because I believe, I think you think this, that I'm helping you achieve your purpose, right?
Well, and together, we're doing that for other people who may be sitting back going, I'm not sure what these two guys are talking about or how it applies to my life, but the more I think about, yeah, that did suck, but it's not the end.
Right.
And I do want to grow my influence, but how do I do that? And I do live for actually helping other people, but I've been fighting obscurity. And that's what we both have, I think, and I won't say surrendered to in the negative context of saying given up, but in the context of saying my purpose is so much bigger on this earth, just like yours, than whether or not I have 1 million followers on Facebook or Instagram. I really don't care. And I don't say that to be flippant. I say that to say that's not the measurement of my success. It is that father and son who are like, we're better off now.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a win for me. And if there are tens of thousands of those, even more of a win. And if I can do that in the Congo as well as I do that in Dallas, that's even more of a win. But every one of those is an escalation of opportunity and escalation of purpose, but they don't change the original drive. And that is, I want to have an impact on the quality of families. I want to have an impact on relationships. I want to lead people to grow their actual authority in their life, the respect, the influence, the impact. And that comes right back to the story. I mean, the stories that you tell in the book that talk about building balance in your life and in all 7 of those areas, the stories that you tell about, this is my failure. And I'm telling you about my failure, not so you can model my failure, but to know that even if your failure was as bad as mine, even if your tragedy was as bad as mine, even if your calamity was as bad as mine, hope remains.
It's hope, it's perseverance, it's inspiration, and I want to relanguage that. I've had a lot of learning events.
Yes.
They're not failures because there's no quit involved. I've developed 5 questions that are in the book. What's the lesson? What's the gift? What did I do to create it? How would I modify it next time to make it better? How is this going to serve me the rest of my life? So I have a near-death experience, a full-blown cerebellar stroke. What's the lesson? When the back of your Lexus hits you in the back of the head and you have a headache for 8 days, there's probably an issue.
Could be.
What's the gift? Because I didn't do anything about the issue, not that I necessarily could have, but I'm still here. I've been granted life, right? What did I do to create it? Well, I was probably hurrying to the event. I was a little careless in the way I opened the back deck. How would I modify it next time? Get rid of that car. Don't ever own a car that attacks you. That
car's abusing you,
that car was gone quick. How's this going to serve me the rest of my life? Well, we did multiple galas. We raised probably $500,000 to $750,000 for the American Heart and Stroke Association, creating leverage from the story. 12 days after my stroke, a guy said, I've had a headache now for 10 days. I'm leaving right here to go straight to the doctor.
Good plan.
Might have saved his life.
Good plan.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, I mean, these are all learning events, and the impact we have. This is where high intention, low attachment comes in. The intention is to provide positive, good, quality impact.
Right.
Make sense? Mm-hmm. How is that going to happen? Who is it going to happen with? What's going to actually happen? How am I going to benefit from it? How are they going to?
Right.
Don't care. That's the low attachment part. It doesn't matter if one person sees this and we do one little gnat's butt worth of good. We've done some good.
Better than we would have if we're sitting on the porch with our feet up.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So all we can do is have that intention of wanting somebody to hear these messages and say, wow, you know what? I need to talk to my cousin or my brother or my sister or my
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
I was meeting with a bride planning her wedding the other day, and as we were talking, I asked, are you doing a father-daughter dance? And she said no. And I said, okay. She said, I think everybody else from my family is coming. He's not. Interesting that you would bring that back up again, but okay. So why not? I mean, you brought it back up again, so why not? She's like, well, I've mentioned it, but he hasn't asked for an invitation. Interesting way of choosing those words. So what that means is you didn't intentionally invite him or uninvite him. She said, right. I said, so let me tell you about Christmas I had with my dad a couple of years ago. And I told her the story about, how my dad sat around and he's like, I don't know how you built this relationship with your kids and your grandkids. I know I didn't teach you how to be a father. And I said, that's true, but I learned how. I had a good example. And she just kind of looked at me. She said, so your story gives me hope that my dad and I can fix this. That's exactly what stories are for when they're used right. It's not about manipulating the sale. It's not about coercing someone into doing something that's not going to benefit them in the long term. It's about the story that says, I've been there, I've done that. Let me show you how to get past it.
My 31-year-old daughter and I do daddy-daughter dates to this day because there was a period when they were younger that we were not close, and that it was not the way I wanted it. Found out it's not the way they wanted it either.
Right.
Sorry, I can't go. I got to stop on that one.
The story that we tell ourselves
Right.
is so important. And the story that we don't tell others could save or change a life.
I'm so bare naked in this book. Not literally, but I mean, I pulled back the curtain on stuff. Like I said, as I did it, I was asked by a group to give a particular talk, and all of a sudden I found, and I record all my talks, and it became part of the book. Well, I even said, don't know why, but I'm about to reveal some things I've never told anybody, and I'm going to do it from stage.
Wow.
And then that became part of the book. And it was like, wow. And then, so as I had pre-readers read the book, they go, how do we never know this about you? And I said, well, I've never pulled back I've pulled back the curtain a lot, but I don't know that I've ever pulled it back that far, right? And they said, thank you for doing that. Yeah. You have no idea how many people this is going to help. And that's the intent. Right? It's not to go, and I probably say, in fact, one of the editors say, will you stop saying this isn't a chronicle of your life? I said, well, I really want everybody to understand. I really have zero desire to share some of this stuff. Right. But in order to share the story and the fixes and the lessons that came out of it, you have to.
You got to be real about it.
You got to be.
I asked proofreaders to read 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior when I wrote that about overcoming addiction. And I think there were 11 people that initially raised their hands and said, send me a copy, I'll proofread for you. 4 actually made it through the book. 5 or 6 sent the book back. One of them handed it back to me in person, and she said, it is so transparent, it is so real and so raw, it terrifies me. But I need to spend some time with your wife. And I was like, again, influence, impact, story. There it is. That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And so she and I had a conversation for about 3 hours, a little more than a year later, and sat down and talked about the content of the book. And she said, I was in a place of healing. And what you were able to be transparent about was more than I was ready to deal with at the moment. But now I realize how much of a crucible it was for me, and it pushed me over the edge to dig into what I needed to change in my life.
That's success. That's
That's
goal.
it.
That's goal.
I think I've given away 100 copies, maybe 200 copies of the book, maybe sold the same amount, and there you are. And I'm okay with that, because the ones that are out there, they're saving marriages, they're changing lives, they're transforming forevers, and that really, really does matter for me. Okay, so as we're wrapping up here,
We got the fifth one.
the fifth one. Oh, story. That's what we've been talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I look at those 5 spokes, from authority to respect to influence to impact to transformation. Right. And transformation comes through story. Right. And it's the stories that you tell in your book. It's the stories that I tell in my book. It's the stories we share from the stage. Right. But the challenge is, and this was my New Year's piece for, I think I released it the week before New Year's. The best resolutions in the world, the best goal setting in the world will fail if you don't change the story behind them. Mm-hmm. And we know this. It's part of that mind sciences concept that if you don't believe what it is that you've claimed on your goals, it doesn't matter. And if your goal says, I'm going to be a best-selling author, but your story in your mind says, I suck at writing, one of those is going to take predominance, and it's more likely going to be the story than the goal. I heard someone say today that science reveals that if you write the goal down, you have a higher chance of achieving it. Well, that's true, unless you also don't believe it. And then it doesn't matter how many times you write it down. If you're writing down a lie, your emotions in your body. It's like saying, I want to turn right, but staring left. Your body's going to do what it's constantly being told to do, rather than what you're trying to manipulate it to do. And so, that fifth part is the story. And that's where the transformation takes place. And the transforming stories and transforming lives is so deeply intertwined. Most people can't tell when one happened first.
Well, what's really interesting, because it's funny, you said it. How many books do you have? 2, 3, 4?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you went, and I said 14, and you went, what? Didn't you? Right? That's how much I've promoted the first 13. Right? This book is the life work. This is the first time.
It's the pinnacle.
It's the pinnacle. It's really the coming together of all these. There are risks. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's all sorts of emotions. It's raw. It's all these different things, right? Well, this is as the stories come together, and you finally. It's interesting because I'm actually doing some work with Jack Canfield right now on new goals. And he sent out this worksheet and different things. And man, I just went, I've never done them that way before.
Right.
There was a new intensity, not intensity in a tough way, but just in a, boy, we're going to make a difference way. Right? It's that, I think when you take your spokes, I think when you really get to the hub, where they're all matching together, right? That's where the power is, right? This gets off into the tangents sometimes, but when you're right here, and when you really crystallize all those areas, and I started to believe even deeper in the ability to serve more people, right? I really, it's crazy to say on one side that you didn't have that before, because I did. But there's this whole, it's like you shifted into a new gear, right? Yeah. I had somebody say to me the other day, I hate the title of the book. I said, that's awesome. Why? Well, people think it's negative. And I said, oh, it's possible. I said, well, do you see the subtitle? Real world solutions to getting through what you're going through. Is that negative? No, that would be very helpful. Okay. I said, well, if you look on page 1 where it explains why the title is the title, right? It's not, it's so funny because we've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard me say something like, "That sucks, what now"?
I don't think so.
I can assure you, you haven't. I don't talk like that. And one of the things that hung me up on this whole book was the title. Because I was working to be very noble and wrap it around legacy and living your legacy.
I remember that first
right?
conversation sitting out right after Wingman, you and me and Jim Gardner,
Exactly.
sitting on the sidewalk outside the Cafe and Grapevine.
Right, and it was about legacy and very noble, and it was pulling all the exact same things together, right? And it was just like, and when I go talk about it from stage, everybody loved it, right? Or the vast majority of people loved it. Let's not over. But when I talked
Or
about
3%, didn't,
yeah,
right?
but when I put it in a book, everybody's like, this is a yawner, right? And so what happened is I did a talk, and a woman came back after I did a talk basically on the book, and a woman came back and said, I got to ask you, how do you have the courage to lead with faith from stage? And I said, well, it's really simple. I only work for one guy, and I've learned I'm allergic to lightning. And she started laughing. And I said, no, I'm serious. I just have to be true to my belief. Right? So I was asked to do the talk again just a few weeks later in a different city. And a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, can I tell you something? I said, sure. She goes, thank you for giving me my life back. I said, what did I do? She said, there was a pop, a physical pop in the middle of your talk. You said something and all of a sudden the shackles came off. You gave me freedom. I said, help me understand this. This is intriguing to me. She said, I'm a cancer survivor. And I said, well, it sounds like you got your life back. She said, you would think so. But I was one of 12 women that went into treatment, and I'm the only one that came out.
Right.
And the survivor's guilt from that was so significant that I've dropped into a deep depression that I've been in that was far worse than the cancer ever was. And she said, in the middle of your talk, I felt the chains break off. You gave me my life back. Whoa.
Wow.
So I get this input, and I've got some people reading and all these different things, right? And I talked to a friend one of the pre-readers, and he goes, I never knew you went through all this stuff. No, I'm not trying to make it like I've been through more stuff than anybody else. I've just been through some stuff. We all have, right? But he goes, I never knew. My God, how'd you get through it? He said, what did you say to yourself after each one of these incidents? I wasn't thinking at all. I went, that sucks, what now? He goes, there's your title. And I go, no, I don't talk like that. He goes, Scott, deep down inside, we all talk like that. We either say it to ourselves, we might not say it externally.
Yeah, maybe we've got enough filters to prevent
We've
anybody
got
else from
enough,
hearing it.
right. And so that's why it was really funny. Literally out of, and I've talked to I don't know how many people about the book now, I have only had one person say, I don't like the title because I don't want to give the dark side any chance.
Right.
Of
Don't
any,
give them any credence.
Don't give them none.
Right.
And I said, that's why it's not a negative statement. It's simply a realization of, I wish it would have happened another way. What do we do now, right? So again, the story and everything that's come together and the opportunities to do things like this, I know here's the other cool thing about this. I have a deeper knowing that this show we're doing right now is going to serve a tremendous number of people. I know it. I used to think it. Now I know it. There's a different level of knowing that comes at a certain point as you go down this path.
So here's my philosophy, and I think your statement just proved it. The 5 spokes, and I'd love for some of my engineering friends like Jaime Chavez to verify this, but if I'm not mistaken, the hub in the wheel system is what receives the primary purpose of the energy. the gears, the drive, whether it's a drive shaft or a bicycle spoke or a motorcycle, sprocket. The hub receives the energy. The spokes transfer the energy to the outer wheel. And the larger the wheel, the more power is going to be transferred through it, small sprocket to large wheel. And that's where the momentum comes through. But what I do also find is that it's a continuum through those 5 spokes. Authority is not necessarily the only starting point. It is also the starting over point. And by that I mean, like what you said, there's something to knowing that what we're doing now has a deeper lasting impact than what we did last time, than what we did before, than what we did way back when, because there's a greater understanding of the respect and the influence and the impact and the power of our story. And as a result, especially as communicators professionally, we've learned not only to tell the story with authenticity, to tell the story with transparency, but how that story, when placed properly, increases the authority that we have in somebody else's life and increases the authority they have in their own life and in somebody else's life as well. And so it becomes that cycle that just continues to go around, and from the hub out, that energy continues to expand in its influence.
There's not a doubt about it. I mean, I think that if there's an encouragement to everybody knows something somebody needs to know.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. A 20-year-old can teach a 50-year-old. A 50-year-old can teach a 10-year-old. There's something there. If you have that childlike wonder, if you have that spirit, again, I keep on saying top of mind, and it's funny. I've said to friends, I know I'm talking about the book a lot, but it just is. It's because I'm excited because it's got me top of mind. Right? I'm seeing things differently.
Right.
I mean, like I say, a FedEx truck.
Your awareness is different.
The awareness is so much different.
Right.
Of just, it's funny, I was with the CEO at these meetings yesterday, and as we pulled into the hotel and we finished about a 2.5 hour drive to get to this hotel, my GPS said, "You have arrived at your destination." And I went, "Thank you very much. You did a great job." And he goes, "You're even being nice to your GPS."
Yeah, I don't always do that.
Well, no, but I don't know that I've ever done it. I'm serious, right? But it just seemed like I was just being playful. I was just having fun. But then when you stop and think about that for a second, would that be okay? What if we just got to the point where we said, "Thank you," or "Man, that's a good-looking suit," or
respect.
There was a lady in line today as we're going through TSA that goes, "I really love that leopard print," to the lady, 2 ahead of me, to the lady 1 ahead of me, right? She goes, "I really love that leopard print. It really, this early in the morning, it wakes me up, And so isn't it amazing how if we would just all change that focus just a little bit. And I don't think it has to be 180 degree. I think if it's just 1 degree, but we get everybody to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think what you'll find is if you make that little shift, I think my wife thinks I'm nuts right now, because I'm having more fun, right?
But you're a different you.
It is. You transform. I think so many people are working so hard to transform. Be the transformation.
Right.
Be what you want to be. Be nicer. Smile more. Have fun. Be a little goofy. Don't be so,
pessimistic or sarcastic.
That's the one I hold no. I train against sarcasm all the time. There's no place for it. I mean, nobody thinks it's funny. That's the bottom line.
Except the person who uses it.
And the reality is they really don't think that. They just do it anyway. But that's true. It's definitely hurtful. But that's a whole nother show. We could do a whole show on
a whole nother show. Yeah,
sarcasm.
Just on the skills to communicate, because it does go back to the story and the authority that you have.
Well, that's exactly it. Why would you want to diminish? Okay, we're working. Think this through just logically. I mean, we want to achieve authority, not necessarily because we want to pound our chest, but we want to have more impact and influence.
Right.
Why would you, and respect, so why would you take a story that diminishes those four, potentially? Because when I take a shot at somebody, isn't that what happens?
Oh, absolutely.
I can lose, my authority can go down, my influence can go down, everything can go down. Well, if I know that to be true, then why do I do it?
Well, maybe you've heard me present my teaching on brand. When I talk about branding, because I spent 10 years at Verizon in the marketing communications department, so there are people who are like, come talk to us about brand, and they always think I'm going to talk about colors, logos, taglines, and that type of thing. And I always say that you're probably not going to like my definition of brand, but I think it's pretty solid, and that is, it's what everybody says about you when you walk out of the room.
Yeah.
It's not what you say about yourself. It's not what your PR agency puts out there. It's not what your social media says. It's not even the slogan, the tagline, or the color scheme you choose. While all of those are important, none of them change who you are. And your brand is what people say about you when you walk out of the room.
Totally agree.
And so if that's the case, then your brand and your name are inextricable. And so someone who is a trusted authority in a particular category, whether it's sports figures or it's movie producing, a Spielberg, for an example, nobody questions whether or not he has authority in the issue of directing a film. Nobody says, certain authors that you look at and you go, best-selling author, millions of books, how do you question their ability to write? Stephen King is an example. He's got a great book on writing. I wouldn't read anything the man has to write except his book on writing because he's been very successful in his writing. He is a trusted authority in writing. But when you do some research on the word authority and the word name and their relationship, they are synonymous in various languages. You can't use name without using authority or authority without name. That's why it's your name that's on your credit card. It's the authority to use that credit card. It's your name that's on your bank account or your utility bill. It's the authority that you have to do that. And so when you dig into name and authority together, here's what you find. It's the manifestation of character.
Nice.
By definition, so if you want to build authority, you build authority by building the manifestation of your character so that your name is synonymous with certain things. And again, that goes back to your story. The story you tell you about you, the story you tell the world about you, the story you tell about other people. All of those impact the character of who you are and what people say about you when you walk out of the room. And all of those things either diminish or enhance your respect.
Well, isn't it interesting that before we started filming, we were talking, we won't name the name, or I won't name the name, but we were talking about somebody who has developed great authority in their marketing ability and their ability to teach that marketing and things like
Right.
that, but they choose to use off-color language and seemingly don't care, or they proclaim they don't care publicly
Right.
about it. But just think what it could be,
Right.
right? I mean, now I got no way to prove that it would be better. My gut feels like it would be, right? But I mean, there's certain things you don't have to do.
Right.
Or maybe you had to do to get known, and then I don't know. But it makes no sense to me.
I think, especially when it comes to coarse language, and
Yeah.
I grew up in a household with coarse language. It was my second language most of my life. I went off to the military. It definitely was second language there. Coming out of the military, and probably the first 10 years of my marriage, it was a constant battle within me. I would say probably 80 to 90%, I've mastered that reaction. But there are still times that I lose my temper in traffic and that language comes out. Is it the natural me? No, it's the unnatural me in a state that I don't prefer to be in.
Right.
When someone says I use that language and I'm being authentic, it makes me wonder if that's really your authentic state. What does that say about your character? And it's not a judgment, it's just a
Right.
question. I love the way Tony Robbins talks about state. And when he talks about state, he talks about, is it a state that produces energy and results, or is it a state that destroys everything around you? And when you can't recognize those two, then you do come in with a state of mind, with anger, with frustration, with irritation. And that's when your kids go run and lock themselves in the room. I lived with a stepdad like that. I didn't want to be a dad like that.
Right.
But the first 10 years of my marriage, I was a dad just like that. I modeled the same behavior that I saw. And so now I have a different relationship with my kids as they're young adults and now kids on their own. Most of the time I walk in the door and the grandkids will leave their parents to come find me. And they scream my name the minute they see me. I absolutely adore that result, but that's the result of changing the state and the
Right.
story of who I am, and not looking in the mirror and going, I'm an angry man that nobody wants to be around. It's all about that story. It's all about that authority. And yes, there are some people who build their entire brand around that. Their brand is their name. It's the manifestation of their character.
Well, it's
Just
amazing.
saying.
It's amazing how as we spend a little more time on the planet, somehow we get a little smarter. Or maybe we adopt some of this stuff ourselves.
You know, I love the way John Maxwell says it. He said, if wisdom came with age, there wouldn't be so many old fools around. I'm like, okay, you're 20 years my senior. You can get away with that. I'm not even going to argue it. But I do feel like I've learned some things. That, you know, I've had my learning moments, not failures, but my learning moments. I would look on many of them and go, no, that was an absolute abysmal failure. But I've learned from them.
Yeah.
Not to repeat them, or how to overcome them, how to get out of them, how not to do that again. And I think it is the crux of what I do as a leader. It's what I intend to do as a leader.
Well, we're off course far more than we're ever on course. It's not a matter of being off course. It's about being off course less often, less far. Everything.
Autopilot.
It's course correction. I mean, I flew in this morning. We had a southerly wind. We didn't take off and the guy say, we're headed towards Dallas, and then say, oh, by the way, welcome to Kansas City. He didn't do that. You know, he said, you know, we're going to get to Dallas just exactly the way we promised you we'd get you to Dallas. Now, he had to do a lot of course correcting to get there. And so, but that's called life.
Right.
We're doing a lot of course correcting. We're doing a lot of stuff. And that's why, again, I think times like this are extremely valuable to share. Pick and choose what you like. Try on what feels good. You know, do what works. Stop doing what doesn't work. Try some new things on. You know, not everything we're saying here is absolute. Not everything is for everybody. But there's probably some pretty dang good nuggets here for a lot of people. You know, I mean, grab the ones that feel good for you. You know, start there.
Grab one or two and apply them and see what happens.
Novel concept. Every once in a while they work.
So let's wrap up with this. Tell me what the 7 pillars are of your book. I know it fits the acrostic balance. And then tell me how people can get it and how they might be able to take advantage of you and your wisdom, whether it's from the stage or in a coaching session or
Sure.
a training session or whatever.
So a big part of the book and the foundation of the book is also the 7 steps to living your legacy, not leaving it, living it.
Okay.
Legacy shouldn't be what we accumulate to leave once we pass. Legacy should be what we're known for as we live.
Right.
And so I've used balance as the acronym for the 7 areas of life. Believe in higher source. Align yourself professionally. Live a healthy lifestyle. Achieve financial freedom. Nurture your relationships. Contribution beyond self. And educate yourself consistently. It's really about balance. And when we look at all 7 areas, and I chose balance purposely because people say, well, it's impossible to have balance. Balance is mythical unless you can split yourself into 7 pieces. So again, another big concept of the book is really, balance is really purposeful imbalance. Meaning, if you're at work, work. Be a 10 at work.
Right.
Don't be a 5 at work and a 5 at play, right? Be a 10 at work. And when you're at play, be a 10 at play. The only one we tend to go outside the 10 scale is on the social. Then somehow we can get to be a 12 sometimes, right?
Right.
But I mean, if you're in your spiritual side, be a 10. Really get that spiritual foundation. So whatever that is for you, really get that deep down in your soul that it's really about being present.
Right.
Be where your feet are. You know, if you're here, be here.
And give it 100%.
Give it 100%. Give it everything you got. You can get the book at tswnbook.com.
Okay.
That sucks now. What? Book.com. tswnbook.com. You can reach me at scott@scottschilling.com.
And of course, all the social medias, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter,
Scott
Instagram.
Schilling 8,
Okay.
because my football number at Iowa was 8. So all my socials that way. Scott Schilling online. There's lots of free resources there. In fact, I'm giving away books right now because I got new books coming in, right? So I'm just moving out old books. I'm giving them away. Just go to the site and order them.
There you go.
ScottSchillingonline.com. Just know that I'm here to be of service, whatever that means. I coach. I'm an executive coach. I train. I speak. I want to use the talents and capabilities I've been granted to do the most good I can possibly do. Have no idea exactly what that means a lot of times, right? I have had some very interesting exchanges over the last few months that are really encouraging. I'm encouraged about humanity and mankind, quite frankly. Yeah. I think we're at a tipping point where people want to do good.
I think you're right. I think the strongest push that our society, our culture, locally and globally needs to see is a push toward excellence.
Yeah.
Doing the very best you can with what you have, with what you've been given. That's not about perfection. It's not about measuring against anybody else's standard. It's about taking what you've been given and pushing it to the max. And I think if we can get more people to do that, to live balanced and realize, you know what, that does suck.
Yeah. Just
what now?
Yeah, that's exactly it. What now? Just take an action towards being a little kinder, a little nicer, dignity, honor, and respect. Help people out, give a smile, costs nothing.
Very good. Scott, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thank you for watching Leading Leaders Podcast. You've been watching the 2020 Servant Leaders Series with Scott Schilling. We appreciate you being here. We hope to see you again on the next episode. You ever noticed that some of the most fascinating conversations you'll ever have? In fact, some of the most fascinating things that you'll learn are from unexpected conversations. Interviews that people have had in various environments have sometimes triggered a conversation offline that really opens up some new ideas. I'm sending out this invitation. Anybody who watches Leading Leaders Podcast, who either is or knows someone who is a leader in their own right, who's making an impact and adding value to people, I would love to have an opportunity just to chat with you about the possibility. Now, in the comments below this post, there will also be a link to go to the application for anyone who is in leadership to just kind of fill that out. Let's talk about why you feel like what you have to say would be of great benefit to this audience and to growing this audience, to growing influence for you and for Leading Leaders Podcast. So if that's something you're interested in, go to the comments, click on the link, and we would love to have a conversation with you. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.